Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for the beautiful guitar music. And thank you, Dan Marino, for the pictures. I especially appreciated seeing the natives like Liatris and Echinacea. We had a beautiful day here on the East Coast, so I'm really feeling those pictures. Again, I'm Maj Dagama, and I'm hosting tonight along with Claire McGough. Henry Crawford is behind the scenes working as technical magic. Our featured poets tonight are Zeina Azzam and Debora Kuan. I will start the evening off by introducing Zeina, then Claire will introduce Debora. If time allows, after the poets have read, there may be a short Q&A session led by Karen Alanier. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books tonight, and to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. The links for buying books and for donating to Café Muse will be dropped into the chat. Feel free to ask questions as well, and we may ask them of the authors at the end. Audience members have been muted. This helps to prevent feedback problems for our readers and ensures uninterrupted programming. Please do bear with us if we encounter a technical glitch. They happen sometimes, but I know you'll forgive us if they do. During the reading, please use the chat to comment or show your appreciation of our featured poets. On-screen finger snaps are acceptable. Our program is scheduled for 1 hour. Please join us again online for the next Café Muse reading on Monday, August 5th. August is our dedicated translation program and is not to be missed. Now, it is my joy to introduce to you the poet Zeina Azzam. In a Washington report on Middle East Affairs review of her latest book, Some Things Never Leave You, it was said that to listen to Zeina Azzam read her work is to be reminded of the wisdom of the ancient Arabs, who gave poets an elevated status in society and who appreciated that poetry was meant to be recited aloud. I have heard Zeina read her poetry and been lucky enough to read with her. She enchants the audience with her elegant delivery and transports us to the landscapes she calls home, or to the places between homes, with rich and sensory writing. In her poem, Nine Spice Mix, a commonly used Palestinian spice blend comes to life and gives voice to the origins and uses of spices like cumin, coriander, and the queen of them all, cardamom. Rather delightfully, the spices begin the poem by dancing a debki together, a traditional Levantine and Palestinian dance. Zeina is also adroit at writing about migration and the physical spaces that we depart physically but never really leave. In her poem, Leaving My Childhood Home, a forsaken friend learns to live like Zeina has, with the empty boxes that pulse with kilos of memories. As the current poet laureate for the city of Alexandria, Virginia, Zeina wrote a poem in honor of Joseph McCoy, an African-American teenager lynched on April 23rd, 1897, at the corner of Cameron and Lee. A Black man was lynched in our city, here. This line repeats in the poem to bring justice near. And every use of this refrain takes us from the spectrum of disbelief to sorrow and finally to a kind of acceptance of our place in this grim near history. It's Zeina's unique life journey that makes her such an effective poet laureate of a Southern city, weighted with the worst of what an empire can do, for her family has fled empire and war and landed her into the life of a diasporic poet who is also proud to have American roots and to be an Arab American. Zeina is a Palestinian American poet, writer, editor, and the poet laureate of Alexandria, Virginia for the years of 2022 to 2025. Her book, Some Things Never Leave You, was released by Tiger Bark Press in 2023, and her chapbook, Bena Bena, In Between, by the Poetry Box in 2021. Zeina's poetry also appears in numerous webzines, journals, and in anthologies. Her poem, Write My Name, with its vivid description of children surviving in war-torn Gaza, went viral in the winter of 2023. Azzam read the poem before the United Nations Palestinian Rights Committee, and the verse has been translated into multiple languages. She has been nominated twice for a Pushcart Prize. Read more of her rich work at zeinaazam.com. Now, please welcome Zeina and her rich poetry to Café Muse.
Good evening, everyone. Majda, that was such a lovely introduction, so generous of you. Thank you so much for looking all sorts of places to learn more about me and to tell everyone here. Just beautifully, beautifully done. Thank you. I'm so grateful. I am also grateful for the beautiful music and photography that started us off tonight. And big thanks to Café Muse, The Word Works, for including me in this poetry series. Thank you to Karen Elenier, Luther Jett, Majda Gama, Claire McGough, Henry Crawford, Ellen Cole, and really the whole team for facilitating our reading tonight and for all your kindness. Luther reached out to me last August to schedule this reading. My new poetry collection that Masha mentioned, Some Things Never Leave You. I'll put it right there. Had just been published a month before. It was July 23. And so here we are in July 24. A whole year has passed by. It's just zipped by. Anyway, I'll be reading some poems from this book, and I'll also read two poems that I've written more recently. Actually, one of them that Majda mentioned, the Write My Name, I thought I would read it to you tonight. So Majda mentioned a few things about me, my story, for those of you who don't know. My parents were Palestinian refugees. They fled for their lives in 1948 during the war when Israel was established. They fled to Syria, where they settled for a few years, and then to Lebanon. I had my childhood in Beirut. And then we immigrated to the US when I was 10 years old. So I'll start with a poem based on memories from my childhood. I think many children could probably write this poem from developing countries. It's a short poem called Just Like That. When our neighbor's son was gunned down in Beirut, when streets flooded after monsoon-like rains, my parents would only say, Inshallah, things will get better. At the beach, when I was 8, a flurry of people rushed into the water, then returned, somber, carrying a young man's limp body on a raft. Once, as my mother's nimble fingers braided my long black locks, I watched a war unfold on TV. Some nights I fell asleep reciting my parents' words, Inshallah, things will get better, often thinking that maybe I, too, could come face to face with a gun or a bomb from the sky, storms that could sweep away my home, or whirlpools as I swam in the sea. And just like that, my life would end, a little brown body washed ashore. Thank you. The title of my book, Some Things Never Leave You, comes from a poem I wrote about my mother. She lived until age 95. I often think about the life of refugees like my parents and how their refugee stories sort of aged with them, their experiences, and how they live with this pain and the memories of dispossession that they experienced early in their lives. Late in her life, my mother started to hallucinate that someone was trying to take away her home. I couldn't help but think that this connected deeply to her early trauma of becoming a Palestinian refugee and losing her home, having to flee and leave everything behind, never able to come back. So I wrote this poem about my mother, dedicated to her, and it's titled A Refugee Grows Old. She is surprised by the pink cyclamen in the pot, examines the foreign petals, upswept as if reaching toward another place. Her own journey seems muted now, details as far away as her childhood in Palestine, where in one scenario, she would have lived in the same place until great-grandchildren played around the lemon tree that defined her family's house in scent and space, where in the real scenario, she fled for her life with a husband and baby, in her pocket a key that rusted over the years. Her memories are like henna on a hand, splendid arabesques fading each day until gone. She has covered so many miles by boat, plane, car, on foot, measured by oceans and clouds, gas fumes, tattered flags left behind, driver's licenses, rental agreements, goodbyes to friends and family, a lifetime unanchored, cleaved. She continues to worry that someone is plotting to take away her home, while slowly hunching over a downswept, bent flower weighed down by hallucinations. She knows some things never leave you, so you have to leave them yourself. Takes small steps away, looking for some peace. Thank you. I see your snaps and claps. Thank you so much. I have so many beautiful memories of my childhood in Beirut. One came to me a couple of years ago about an aunt whose house we used to visit. She was related to us by marriage, as she was the wife of my mother's paternal uncle. In Arabic, as in many other languages, we distinguish between maternal and paternal relatives. And so, and we often, we call that relative sometimes by that relationship and not by their actual name. So the words Mart Ammi mean wife of my paternal uncle. So here is Mart Ammi, wife of my paternal uncle. As a child, I had no idea of her name, just that my mother called her Mart Ammi. She was a kind and smiling figure, the Arabic welcoming words ahlan wa sahlan always on her lips. She filled our bellies like a bountiful rain nourishes a garden. At her table, we enjoyed deftly rolled grape leaves, the myriad ways she could envision cooking an eggplant, okra cilantroed and garlicked just so. She would hug me against her soft bosom as if I were the girl she never had after 4 sons. One summer when I was 9, I sneaked out of our apartment and walked the 2 Beirut city blocks to her place alone. She sat me down with a glass of lemonade, fragrant with rosewater, grinning, then told me to get home quickly. My clandestine escapade became our secret. It was 14 years after we emigrated to the United States that I saw her again on a visit to Lebanon, when I finally learned her first name. But out of habit, I continued to call her Mart Ammi, the moniker that spelled how she fit into the patriarchal order of things. She insisted on accompanying me as I traveled to Syria by taxi so I wouldn't cross the border alone. We spent hours together, the years between us evaporating like a cloud of steam over a soup pot. We dined on meza and shish kebab, drank arak with relatives, stayed up late, chatting. She got tired and admitted shyly that she was making threads of her speech. Our merry unraveling that evening is one of my fondest memories of Martammi. Her signature curly, shiny hair, always tightly pulled away from her face, had started to slacken. During our time together, I saw a woman jolly and vulnerable, one who knew how to navigate around border officials, score a good bargain in the souk, opine about wars and inflation and refugees, narrate detailed stories about aunts and uncles long deceased. Our depth of kinship had crisscrossed geography and time and language, our family history of perpetual goodbyes. Thank you. So Majda mentioned the poem that I had written. I wrote it in October after the war on Gaza started. And it has, like she said, it has gone viral. It's been translated to Japanese and Dutch and French and Arabic and Hebrew. And I keep thinking, why has this poem got so much resonance here in the US and around the world? And I think it's because it's about children. Over 15,000 children in Gaza have been killed by Israeli bombs since 2023 October, and tens of thousands have been injured, and many have had amputations, and so many thousands are orphaned. It is, just truly unconscionable. So this poem came to me when I read that some parents in Gaza had resorted to writing their children's names on their legs to help identify them should either they or the children be killed. So it's titled Write My Name. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Use the black permanent marker with the ink that doesn't bleed if it gets wet, the one that doesn't melt if it's exposed to heat. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Make the lines thick and clear, and add your special flourishes so I can take comfort in seeing my mama's handwriting when I go to sleep. Write my name on my leg, Mama, and on the legs of my sisters and brothers. This way we will belong together. This way we will be known as your children. Write my name on my leg, Mama, and please write your name and Baba's name on your legs too, so we will be remembered as a family. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Don't add any numbers like when I was born or the address of our home. I don't want the world to list me as a number. I have a name and I'm not a number. Write my name on my leg, Mama. When the bomb hits our house, when the walls crush our skulls and bones, our legs will tell our story, how there was nowhere for us to run. Thank you. I've got a couple more poems. This is my third year of serving as Poet Laureate of Alexandria, and it has been such an honor and a really, really truly enriching experience for me. One of the really exciting things that the city does, it holds a jazz festival every June, and we just had it a couple of weeks ago. And between the musical sets, there are poets who read, which is really lovely. And I've been asked to read the last 3 years. And jazz is my favorite genre of music, so it's really a pleasure to participate in this way. So I'd like to share one of the poems that I wrote. It's about Duke Ellington, and as you probably know, Duke Ellington is from Washington, D.C., so he's one of ours. As I did some research to to write this poem, I found out that he had synesthesia, which, as you know, is a where you cross senses so that people hear things when they see things. So that's exactly what it was like that for him. He could see colors when he would hear notes of music, and vice versa. So I just loved learning that about him. And so this tidbit informed the poem that I wrote. And it's called Duke Ellington's Synesthesia. You heard notes as colors, ears and eyes coupled like thunder and lightning, a bird's song together with its vibrant plumage. The band was your artist's palette. You painted sounds and found harmonies in an azure mood, singing about your solitude. When DC erupted with white on black attacks in the red summer of 1919, did you turn to the ivories for solace? Did your fingers touch and see the bluest of blues? Were you starting to understand the hues in Black history, from black to brown to beige? Were these bold words you wrote decades later beginning to tint your mind? Lord, dear Lord above, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through. A colorful school of the arts and a bridge in Washington, D.C. were named after you. But it was 25 years after you died that they gave you the Pulitzer Prize, setting aside the satin doll and the A train to Harlem, your indigo mood, and all those things that don't mean a thing if they ain't got that swing. I imagine you somewhere in the stars with Billy Strayhorn and Johnny Hodges, Mahalia Jackson, and Ella Fitzgerald, making music like old times, you composing in the violet rays of the galaxy, hearing the shimmering caravans of comets and fashioning their iridescence into vivid ballads, syncopated light. Thank you. Those of you who live in DC probably know that Malcolm X Park on Meridian Hill has had a long-standing drum circle on Sunday afternoons. People bring their drums and they beat the drums and people dance and some people sing, and it's a beautiful sight. So one time after I actually participated, I brought my djembe. I wrote this poem. It's called Dante and the Drum Circle. I trek up the 15th Street incline, drum slung on my shoulder. On my left stands a statue of Dante Alighieri, towering from inside the park in flowing robes, a wreath of laurel leaves framing his serious, unsmiling face. The philosopher poet beckons me out of the traffic and noise and into Malcolm X Park. He's holding his signal narrative poem, the Divina Commedia, close to his chest with both hands, as if to say, look, this is my life's work. Already my ears sense the distant rhythms of conga and ashiko and djembe, the rumble of hands and beat in accelerating heat. I think, where else could I spend a Sunday afternoon, starting with Dante's obsession with souls traveling from hell to purgatory to paradise, then jump forward 7 centuries to a mass of vibrant and vibrating percussionists and dancers, but on a hilltop in DC. Walking up past the fountains, I find them in a makeshift winding circle where palms glide and aim and land, coax animal skins to come alive with rhythm, pulsate together like a wave of infinite patterns and beats. There's no thought of who or what or why, questions that always wrap us like a rough feeling shawl. What matters now is only the deep sound we create and repeat and its reverberations. I make my way between lithe dancers who shake and sway, snaking in and out of the throbbing circle. They know in their souls how to marry drumbeat and heartbeat. I eke out a seat on a stone ledge, curl my legs around the djembe that journeyed from West Africa to my arms in DC, slip into the rhythm. Leaving Dante's infernal world, I enter a space of harmony with strangers as we all nod and smile. A message resonates in the thrum of the drums. Could we have arrived at our own paradise? Thank you. I actually have one more poem, but I think I've finished my time, so I'll stop right here. And again, thank you so much for your attention, and I appreciate all of you being here, and thank you again, Majda.
Thank you, Zeina. Your poems were so tender and resonant and poignant, and thanks again for reading. I'm Claire McGough, and I'm a co-host for Café Muse, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce our next featured reader, Debbie Kuan. Women on the Moon is Debbie's third and most recent collection of poetry. Here it is. It's a full-length collection, beautiful cover. Debbie earned her MFA in poetry from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Her work has been widely published, appearing in Poetry, the Kenyon Review, the New Republic, and elsewhere. She's also been anthologized in the Brooklyn Poets Anthology, or the People. That was the Brooklyn Poets Anthology, Advanced Language and Literature, What Things Cost, an Anthology for the People, and Poetry Studio, Prompts for Poets. Debbie's been awarded residencies at Yaddo, McDowell, and the Santa Fe Art Institute. She's received many awards, including a U.S. Fulbright Creative Writing Fellowship. She's received multiple Pushcart Prize nominations and the University of Iowa Writers Workshop Graduate Merit Fellowship. Debbie's the current Poet Laureate of Wallingford, Connecticut. In her latest collection, Women on the Moon, Debbie weaves stories that are both ancient and near. Poems of an adult looking back on her ancestry and childhood. Stories of mothering, coupling, growing, and being. Debbie's poems are beautifully ordered according to the phases of the moon, a moon that appears and disappears in haunting and surprising ways in the night sky of her collection. I was struck by the wonderful variety of content and form. And I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if Debbie, what she's going to read tonight, but there's a poem that you can't miss called Hot Space after Freddie Mercury. I loved that one. There's also something that struck me was the juxtaposition of titles. For instance, she has a poem titled Moon Goddess in Transition, next to a poem titled Unstudying Your IKEA Rug While You're Asleep with a Fever. We experience intellect alongside of vulnerability in this collection, in which not only the moon weaves through, but so does magic. Like the magic that opens this collection in the poem titled Magic Lesson. One of my favorite passages in this poem is, I'm unraveling as a mother does a knot from a bow to astonish you. The poem ends like this. I want you to be a student of the impossible binds, a magician of a bloom from a fist, a dove from a dove from a dove. And what a masterful way to begin this collection. Please welcome Debbie Kuan to Café Muse.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that beautiful introduction. It's just lovely hearing that, and it's wonderful that you had such a close reading of my work. It's a real honor. Zeina, it's such an honor to read with you. I'm so happy to hear your work, and it was so rich and beautiful. And as you were reading, I was thinking how we shared a little bit in common. I was thinking about my father, who was a 12-year-old refugee of the Chinese Civil War in 1949 and fled from mainland China with his family and another family in the latrine of a ship, actually. And they fled to Taiwan, which is where he grew up and where my mother also grew up. So it was really quite an honor to hear your work, and so happy to meet you virtually. And thank you so much to Karen and everyone else for coming out tonight. It was a beautiful day. I'm still perpetually amazed that people still voluntarily do things on Zoom after the pandemic. So I'm so grateful that you're all here. I'm going to read a couple of poems from on the Moon, as Claire mentioned, and maybe I'll read Hot Space. I wasn't planning to, but I love reading that poem, so I might end with that one for this book. And then I'm going to read some new work from a collection that I'm writing, which is about being in the sandwich generation, taking care of aging parents and also taking care of very young kids. And my husband and I are in a strange situation because we had our kids very late. So we have very young children and we have very elderly adults, parents to take care of as well. So that's what the new book is about. So I start off with a couple of poems from Women on the Moon. The first poem in the mothering section is called Intentions. 6 months pregnant, I go to the eyeglass shop to tighten the corners of my glasses. But the man who attempts to help me snaps off one wing by mistake and cannot reattach the hinge. With apology, he returns my life to me, and I hold it in my hands, a crippled, sighing sparrow. Lunchtime faces near and recede, plates of melted custard, a pizarro of emphatic chatter, as I retrace the way I came, fledgling slow, a glass piano on the floor of the sea, my body braced for whatever softness I should meet. Thank you. And I'll read one of the poems Claire mentioned on studying your IKEA rug while you're asleep with a fever. This is one of the oldest poems in the book. I wrote it when my daughter was an infant, and she's 8.5 now. So it's about 8 years old. On studying your IKEA rug while you're asleep with a fever. And just so you know, because I don't have an image of the rug to show you, it's a very colorful geometric abstraction sort of rug. There's no, figurative qualities. It's all very abstract. On the carpet of your room, the zebra sun rises over the Dalmatian hills. Its rays are hyphens, Morse code, the language of closed winter roads, and the turquoise sky is teeming with its own machinery, 9 mammalian raindrops. When you were born, all these animal attentions began to coalesce. I could begin to abandon reason, since now I loved beyond it, despite it. I could ride the nerves of highways on my own utterances, writing forever, filling blanks, lassoing the muscular neck of the continent. I would always be behind my hand advancing, taking the hill, an army of horses, leading us over ground as guard and guardian. And the words it scrawled on the face of the land would become our eyes, our tunnels, our codes, our beasts, our myths, our lives, our books. Just taking note of the time. So I think I started 8:03-ish. So I always lose track of time when I'm reading. This poem is called How to Raise Children at the End of the World, and it's meant to be slightly hyperbolic, but also not. How to Raise Children at the End of the World. First of all, buy time, hoard beans, bury your head in a heap of raw sugar if you need. At the very least, don't ever catch yourself using the phrase end of the world. Phrases are luxuries. They are soap operas for the unbusy parent. So are sea levels, disinformation algorithms. Do not allow your imagination to tumble down that sinkhole of midnight mirrors. Your consciousness must get on with things. Who, what, where. It must edit, redact, hunt through your purse for the crucial white yarn Elsa braid to clip to your toddler's ponytail before she detonates. Color, connect four. Try to extract the slippery funny bone with trembling fingers. Though when you place their sopping mittens on the radiator to dry, permit yourself to pause at the makeshift shrine, at the agony of its goodness. And when they stun you with surly ingratitude, blame the lead, arsenic, mercury that seeped into their organic baby food. Why not? But most importantly, keep vigil. As a dirigible of wildfire smoke from the other coast blithely floats past your car. How could you ever spare them what awaits? Recall that 20 years ago, when you flew out to LA to rescue your cousin from the grip of a gang, all you did was perch yourself, useless, on the foot of his bed, while he played a video game, back turned to you the entire time. You were 23, he was 17, and the broad burnt landscape of his neck and back was tattooed with dead boys' names, phoenixes, voluptuous anime warriors, and the Chinese characters for courage and dragon. He did not call you Jie, older sister, anymore. You are lucky he did not call you worse. Bon courage, indeed, and let that dress rehearsal be a lesson to you. Who did you think you were? What was your love going to do? Where had you been? You were too late, by a heap of raw years. You would not save him. The end of the world had already come and gone. Thank you so much. And then I think I'll end with Hot Space. If I can find it. So I was a fan of Freddie Mercury when I was a teenager. Probably a lot of you loved Freddie Mercury and Queen as well. And because of the way that he passed as white, I never knew, or I didn't know for a long time that he wasn't Caucasian and he wasn't white. And finding out that he was a person of color was really revelatory to me as a person of color, and not seeing anyone who looked like me in pop culture. So he was sort of a life raft in that way for me. Hot Space, after Freddie Mercury. You pranced past us, above us, belting against your doctor's wishes, dying in real time. Shirtless and giraffe-legged god of rock, your knee unlocking to punch, punch, punch the beat. We were all mothers loving you, Freddie, because we couldn't be lovers. Not after Mary, who ashed your lashes and kissed your teeth, who wrapped you early in faux rabbit fur. I was no exception, 16, contact lensed and fevered in my father's old button-downs and rusty bolo ties. Fridays, I learned acoustic guitar in the emerald carpeted basement of a senior who looked just like you. Mustached, panther black hair, keyboard pulled tight to his abdomen. He floated on the balls of his feet too, light as a braid of fishbone. It's a boy's thing, I used to think, these anthems of football champions, of basketball gyms and horseshoe matches, of rainbow polyblend jerseys and electric stadium rain. Until I saw you for myself, as myself, born Farouk Balsara, an island of urgency, band of one lizard-gilled outsider, high notes bowing the floorboards of heaven. That winter of 1992, my guitar teacher invited me to hear him play the Bohemian Rhapsody guitar solo in our half-hearted auditorium. Too diffident to face forward, yet too cocky to glance my way. No, he didn't choose anyone else. He chose to vanish, only to appear years later, first a biker, then, just as improbably, a Morgan Stanley banker. I barely recognized that hunched, hatted proxy astride a varnished hog. I had been a fool in faith. No brand of worship would bring back the dead. What does it take to will yourself into being, to shed your former self, your ancestry, like a haughty, calcified skin? Generations on a charcoal pyre. For years, I drowned in your tragedy with the disbelief of a mother who could never reach you in the first place. I studied your duck lips, your vaguely foreign gestures, your award-winning baby photo, your elastic boxing stance, only to come away empty. How does one become public yet opaque, seamless yet utterly impossible? A phoenix burning all the way into a snow-crusted sea. By the time I graduated high school, you had already aged 30 years in a matter of 3. It scorched your skin to wear a silk shirt, 1 foot atrophied beyond recognition. You, immortal prodigal son, feathered prince of planets, a year with an orbit of a cure. Like Icarus, you had chosen Mercury to throw your arms around the sun. But what good did it do you? You stood finally in your Japanese garden, granting one last interview with light. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for reading Hot Space. I was really hoping you would. All your poems were beautiful and beautifully read, and just very touching and moving. And now our founder, Karen.
Okay, I'm going to do something unorthodox. I'm going to ask Debbie to read one more poem, and then I'm going to ask Zeina to read one more poem because I feel like we have the time and we need to hear a little more. So, Debora, you're on.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna read the new work actually. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, these are prose poems / lyric essays from the new book. And this first one's called Untitled Snapshot. Almost 4, spread eagle at the foot of the reclining bed, the coarse industrial carpet beneath him in digital dots and dashes of olive, taupe, and oak, non-committal colors chosen for the most ignoble of human rooms. This one with its scent of lilac, fresh lilies, of warm apple juice and urine, so reminiscent of the year I was 13, my grandmother in and out of the hospital, the rehab center, finally coming home only to collapse on the laundry room floor. We watch a tortoise eat turnips at a wildlife sanctuary on the plasma TV, and for a moment, the impossible task of being human rests lightly on the mind, like steam off the Gulf. I find the small white hairbrush on the table under the days-old bouquet, and gingerly brush my father-in-law's hair. Thank you so much. I'll just read this last one. Thank you so much for letting me read from new work. This last one's called Practical Uses for Your Daily Panic. I leave the house, return the same morning. I stretch a rubber band until it is about to snap. When my mother-in-law arrives at my father-in-law's room today, she finds him using the walker, his hands in blue nitrile gloves. When she asks where he got them, he answers matter-of-factly, "These? They're my work gloves." Her texts reach through the phone and shake us with despair. Today marks 3 months since his fall. In one of my favorite films, At Land by Maya Deren, there is a scene where Deren is walking down a dirt road talking to a man, but every time the camera returns to the man, he is someone else. Maybe we can think of it that way, a new man every day, a new conundrum, a new revelation on the other side of delirium. This is surely the kindest reading of outliving the one you love. Years ago, I sat on a folding chair in the back row of a meditation center, and my Buddhist teacher kindly admonished us for not thinking enough about death. I want to tell him I'm thinking about it now and now and now. Thank you so much.
So I guess it's my turn.
It is, Zeina. It's your turn.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and read the poem I was going to read when I kind of ran out of time. Excuse me. This is a new poem as well, and it's not in the book, obviously. I wrote this for a special project that I was involved in recently called Writing the Land. Poets from different parts of the country are invited to visit particular land conservancies and to write about, to visit them and then to write about them. So I was given the G. Richard Thompson Wildlife Management Area in the eastern slope of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And this is about 60 miles west of Alexandria. It's just, thousands of acres of wildlife and birds and flowers and trees. And the Appalachian Trail cuts through the area. So I have 3 poems in this book. It's called Writing the Land, Virginia. It was just published last month. So this is one of the poems. Excuse me. It's called Something Spectacular. It was after we saw a sassafras that sprouted 1-lobed, 2-lobed, 3-lobed leaves all on the same branch, and beheld the crown of elderberry shining white against an azure sky, then climbed the winding path to visit the hidden lake skirting the Blue Ridge Mountains, dragonflies and damselflies filthing about. It was after we spent hours on the trails, noticing scat piles of bears, coyotes, foxes, pondering how the serotinous cones of the Table Mountain pine rely on extreme heat, even fire, to melt resin and release their seeds. How seeds of other trees disperse with the help of animals, a nudge, the wind. It was after all that, and we got back in the truck and started to wend our way down the mountain, when the friendly lands manager suddenly decided to backtrack on the dirt road. "I'll show you something spectacular," he said. Something worth going back to, it seemed, despite the July sun. He drove to a small patch of green on the side of the road, dotted with scarlet bee balm, miniature heads of flame strewn wildly about, hummingbirds homing in on brilliant red petals. He then explained that their coarse leaves make poultices and soothe stings and wounds, nature's mamas that offer healing, beckon to balm. We ended our day in awe of the beauty and gifts of those scarlet whorls before I contemplated returning to my urban world. Thank you.
So thank you, by the way, Zeina and Debora, for these poems that we were certainly wanting to hear, and I'm glad that there was more time for that to happen.
Thank you for Zeina and Debora for those poems, especially giving us more of your poetry. Zeina, I plant native plants, so I really appreciated your newest one. I hope I can read it in print. As I said at the beginning of the show, our next meeting is August 5th.
Yes.
Our translation program. And that's usually hosted by Barbara Goldberg, and it's a lot of fun. She has a lot of knowledge and expertise, and please join us then. Thank you for making this possible. Karen, thank you for your just being the backbone. Henry, thank you for the technical work here, and thank you to our audience for joining us, but mostly, oh, here's Claire. Thank you to the audience for joining us.